In the waning months of 1919, specifically during the chill of November, a sequence of events unfolded beneath the opulent facade of the Frick estate that defied the conventional boundaries of history and archaeology. It began with three workmen, men accustomed to the grit and tangible reality of New York City's subterranean infrastructure, lowering themselves on sturdy hemp ropes into a jagged aperture that had been carved through the basement floor. What these men extracted from the oppressive darkness over the following 11 days was a collection of anomalies that, according to every established record of the era, was never supposed to exist. The presence of these men in that specific location was itself a deviation from the master plan. The architectural blueprints for the mansion, meticulously drafted and certified by the city's most prestigious firms, indicated nothing but solid, undisturbed earth and the ancient metamorphic bedrock of Manhattan beneath the foundation level.
There was no provision for a sub-basement, no record of a colonial-era cistern, and certainly no mention of the subterranean architecture they were about to encounter. The discovery was precipitated by a structural intuition. The foreman, a seasoned veteran of the construction trades, had noted a subtle but unmistakable sag in the floorboards the previous afternoon, occurring directly beneath a heavy accumulation of supply crates. When he struck the concrete with a steel hammer, the resulting sound was not the dull thud of solid earth, but a resonant, haunting hollow. Driven by a mixture of professional concern and curiosity, the crew utilized chisels and heavy mallets to breach the surface. They expected to find a forgotten septic pit or perhaps the remains of an 18th century cellar from the structures that had occupied the lot before Henry Clay Frick's grand vision took shape. Instead, they descended into a chamber that appeared to predate the estate, the street, and perhaps the very arrival of European settlers on the island of Manhattan. The contents of this chamber, categorized into 7 distinct and disturbing sections, have been the subject of hushed debates in private correspondence and suppressed memoirs for over a century. This is the chronicle of what was never intended to reach the light of day. The first anomaly noted by the workmen was the composition of the chamber's floor. Upon landing, they realized they were not standing on the damp soil of the island or the jagged edges of schist. The floor was comprised of precisely cut stone blocks, each measuring approximately 3 feet square. The craftsmanship was of such a high caliber that the seams between the blocks were virtually non-existent. The foreman attempted to slide a thin copper penny between them and found the fit to be hermetic. There was a conspicuous absence of mortar or any binding agent. Instead, the blocks appeared to be held together by a sophisticated system of interlocking joinery that bore no resemblance to the masonry techniques utilized in New York or anywhere else in the United States at the time. When the men brought their kerosene lanterns closer to the surface, they observed that the stone was not the local granite or sandstone. It possessed a subtle pinkish hue and a remarkably tight, parallel grain, characteristics of stone quarried in the eastern Mediterranean or even further east toward the Levant. The logistical impossibility of such material being transported and installed beneath Manhattan in a chamber absent from all public records remained an unanswered question. The estate's official log, written with a palpable sense of reluctance, suggested the stone might have been discarded ship ballast from the colonial period. However, ballast does not arrange itself into a perfectly level, interlocking floor of architectural precision. Within a week, the city's engineers had photographed the floor once, filed the images in a restricted archive, and ordered a thick layer of reinforced concrete to be poured over the site, effectively erasing the pink stone from the physical world. The second discovery was situated within the western wall of the primary chamber. Initially, the workmen identified the object as a piece of discarded iron due to its dull, metallic luster. However, when samples were laboriously chipped away and dispatched to a metallurgist at Columbia University for analysis, the results were baffling. The laboratory identified the material as a complex copper alloy containing significant traces of silver and a measurable percentage of an unknown element that defied spectral identification. The object itself was a massive coil, a spiral approximately 4 feet in diameter,
partially embedded in the pink stone wall. Both ends of the spiral vanished into the masonry, suggesting that the coil extended deep into the surrounding earth. There were no visible terminals, no wiring, and no mounting brackets. It appeared as though the stone had been formed around the metal, or the metal had been integrated into the stone through a process unknown to modern science. One workman, Patrick Conlon, reported a sensation of faint, pulsing warmth when he placed his bare hand against the metal, a phenomenon that contradicted the expected thermal properties of an object buried in a cold, sealed vault for centuries. While his colleagues remained skeptical, the metallurgist's private notes reflected a similar unease, stating that the alloy's composition was inconsistent with any known manufacturing process in the Western world. The coil remained in situ, eventually sealed behind the same concrete that claimed the floor. The third finding was a massive slab set into the wall opposite the metallic coil. The workmen initially described it as a bronze door, though subsequent testing of a small scraping indicated a far more complex and layered alloy. The slab stood 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, possessing a monumental presence that dominated the room. It lacked hinges, handles, or any discernible locking mechanism. The most striking feature, however, was the artwork etched into its surface. The etchings depicted a natural world that felt fundamentally alien. There were trees whose branches twisted into perfect geometric spirals, patterns that do not occur in terrestrial botany. There were animals portrayed with an anatomical complexity that defied classification, creatures with superfluous limbs or wings arranged in configurations that would render flight impossible by known aerodynamic principles. Interspersed among these images were rows of small, angular symbols that suggested a sophisticated system of writing, yet no consultant or academic could link the script to any known linguistic family. When the foreman attempted to force the door, the results were futile. Sledgehammers rebounded with a metallic ring that vibrated through the men's bones. Pry bars bent under the pressure, and steel drill bits snapped as if they were made of glass. After 3 days of failed attempts, a representative from the Frick estate intervened, ordering all efforts to cease. The door was photographed, documented in a secret ledger, and then hidden behind a newly constructed brick wall, leaving its secrets undisturbed and its destination unknown. The fourth discovery was found through a narrow, low-ceilinged passage that branched off from the southern side of the main chamber. The workmen navigated this corridor for 30 feet before emerging into a secondary, smaller room. Arranged along the perimeter were 12 figures, each approximately 5 feet tall, carved from a dark, dense gray stone that was neither marble nor basalt. The figures were humanoid in form, draped in heavy, intricately folded robes that seemed to possess a weight and texture, even in stone. However, it was the faces that truly unsettled the men. While they possessed eyes, noses, and mouths, the proportions were subtly distorted. The eyes were significantly larger than those of a human, and the ears were positioned slightly higher on the cranium. Most disturbing of all was the fact that each of the 12 figures was an exact, identical duplicate of the others. There were no variations in the folds of the robes or the wrinkles of the stone skin, suggesting a method of reproduction that bypassed the individual touch of an artist. Patrick Conlon, already on edge from his encounter with the warm coil, refused to re-enter the room, claiming he felt the statue's gaze following him in the flickering lantern light. The chamber was sealed within days, the 12 identical sentinels left to stand in perpetual darkness, unstudied by any archaeologist or historian. The fifth anomaly was a massive carving on the north wall that the men initially mistook for a decorative fresco. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was a map etched into a single slab of pink stone and highlighted with faint mineral pigments. This map did not represent the world as it was known in 1919, nor as it is known today. While the general silhouettes of the continents were recognizable, the details were profoundly different. North America was depicted with a vast landmass extending far into the Pacific Ocean, A substantial island, larger than Great Britain, sat in the center of the North Atlantic, positioned between Europe and the Caribbean. Most shockingly, Antarctica was shown entirely free of ice, with a complex network of rivers and what appeared to be coastal settlements. The Mediterranean Sea was depicted as a much smaller, landlocked body of water.
Across the top of the map, the same angular, unrecognizable script found on the bronze door was repeated in a long, flowing inscription. A surveyor's attempt to document the map was thwarted when his sketches were confiscated by the estate representative. The original carving was eventually covered with a thick layer of industrial plaster, masking the impossible geography from any future investigation. The sixth finding was perhaps the most physically imposing: a circular shaft, 2 feet in diameter, located in the exact center of the chamber floor. It dropped vertically through the pink stone and into the depths below. When the workmen lowered a lantern on a rope, they watched the flame descend for over 200 feet without ever reaching a bottom. The most remarkable aspect of the shaft was its lining. The interior was not rough-hewn rock, but was entirely coated in long, transparent, hexagonal crystals. These crystals grew inward from the walls, creating a shimmering, refractive tube that scattered the lantern light into a kaleidoscope of reflections. The geometric precision of the shaft and the presence of such a vast vein of crystals beneath Manhattan were geological impossibilities. The foreman's call for a volunteer to be lowered into the shaft was met with silence. The men were terrified by a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to emanate from the depths, a sound like a distant, subterranean wind. Ultimately, the shaft was capped with a heavy steel plate and buried under concrete, its depth and purpose remaining a mystery to this day. The seventh and final discovery was an object found on a small stone shelf in the eastern wall, placed there with a casualness that suggested it had been momentarily set aside by a previous occupant. It was a book. The binding was a dark, leather-like material that showed no signs of age, decay, or wear. The pages were made of a thin, translucent substance that felt more like a synthetic film than parchment or paper. Every page was filled with the same angular script and accompanied by detailed diagrams. These illustrations depicted mathematical equations of immense complexity, architectural designs for buildings that resembled no known style, and celestial maps where the constellations were entirely foreign to the Northern Hemisphere. The book contained no title, no author, and no date. The foreman delivered the volume to the estate representative, who subsequently took it to a private collector of rare manuscripts. After a brief period of study, the collector returned the book and refused to ever speak of it again. The last known record of the manuscript placed it in a secure storage facility in 1923, after which it vanished from history. The implications of these 7 findings are profound. They suggest that beneath the surface of modern New York lies the remnants of a civilization or a reality that predates our understanding of time and progress. Was the Frick estate built over the ruins of a pre-Ice Age city? Was it a gateway to a world whose geography and physics operate on principles we have yet to discover? The official narrative has always been one of silence and suppression. The workmen were compensated for their silence. The photographs were destroyed or hidden, and the chamber itself was entombed in concrete. Yet the questions remain. The pink stone, the warm metal, the unopenable door, the identical statues, the impossible map, the crystal shaft, and the nameless book all point to a truth that is far more complex than the history books allow. As the city continues to grow and the skyscrapers reach higher into the sky, the secrets beneath the Frick estate remain buried, waiting for a time when the world is ready to confront the reality of what lies beneath the surface. The narrative of the 1919 discovery is not merely a ghost story or a piece of urban folklore. It is a documented, albeit suppressed, challenge to the linear progression of human history.
When we consider the specific details of the artifacts, we see a pattern of advanced technology and anomalous geography that suggests a global presence long before the rise of the civilizations we recognize. The precision of the stonework alone rivals the Great Pyramid of Giza or the megalithic structures of Pumapunku. The presence of a copper alloy that includes unknown elements suggests a mastery of metallurgy that exceeds the capabilities of the early 20th century. The identical nature of the 12 figures hints at a method of mass production, or perhaps a cultural emphasis on uniformity that is alien to our artistic traditions. Furthermore, the map found in the chamber serves as a startling piece of evidence for the theory of crustal displacement, or a vastly different climatic past. The depiction of an ice-free Antarctica and a lost Atlantic continent aligns with various fringe theories that have persisted despite academic dismissal. If such a map existed in 1919, it would have been a revolutionary document, capable of overturning the entire field of cartography. The fact that it was plastered over suggests a deliberate effort by those in power to maintain the status quo of historical knowledge. The Frick estate, a symbol of American industrial wealth and cultural refinement, thus sits atop a foundation of profound mystery, a juxtaposition of the modern Gilded Age and an ancient, forgotten epoch.
The psychological impact on the workmen cannot be overstated. These were men of the earth, practical and unsentimental, yet they were visibly shaken by what they encountered. Patrick Conlin's refusal to return to the statue chamber and his obsession with the warmth of the metal coil speak to a primal reaction to the uncanny. The foreman's decision to seal the crystal shaft after hearing the low hum suggests a recognition of something dangerous or beyond human comprehension. These were not the reactions of men who had found a colonial trash heap. These were the reactions of men who had glimpsed the abyss. In the years following the closure of the chamber, rumors occasionally surfaced in the architectural and engineering communities of New York. There were whispers of strange vibrations felt in the lower levels of the Frick collection, and accounts of modern maintenance crews finding inexplicable dead zones where radio and electronic signals would fail. However, the official stance of the estate and the city has remained one of total denial. The 1919 incident is treated as a non-event, a clerical error in the long history of Manhattan's development. Yet, for those who have seen the leaked sketches or read the private journals of the men involved, the truth is inescapable. The mystery of the Frick chamber invites us to look more closely at the world around us. It suggests that the ground we walk on is not as solid as it seems, and that the history we are taught is only a thin veneer over a much deeper and more complex reality. The 7 findings, the floor, the coil, the door, the figures, the map, the shaft, and the book, remain as silent witnesses to a past that we are not yet permitted to understand. They are the fragments of a puzzle that, if completed, would change everything we know about our place in the world. Until that day comes, they remain hidden beneath the concrete and the silence, a secret buried in the heart of the city that never sleeps. The bronze door remains closed, the crystal shaft remains dark, and the identical figures continue their eternal vigil in the shadows of the Upper East Side. What lies beyond that door may one day be revealed, but for now, it is a story told in whispers, a reminder of the things we were never supposed to bring back to the surface.